Thanks for staying with us. Time now for African News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, African leaders in Addis Ababa for the bloc's annual summit concentrate on the crises in South Sudan and Central African Republic. Ethiopia's Prime Minister warns the conflicts threaten stability across the region. Also, with hundreds of thousands of people forced from their homes by the unrest in South Sudan, our correspondent takes a closer look at the challenges faced by those refugees who've headed to Uganda. And after a stark warning from the EU, Ghana's pushing fast to clean up its loosely managed fishing industry. First up, leaders in Addis Ababa for the African Union Summit are officially there to discuss agriculture and food security across the continent. But again, they've been bogged down by the conflicts in South Sudan and Central African Republic. South Sudan's currently in negotiations with rebels 6 weeks after the start of battling in which thousands were killed. Central African Republic descended into chaos following the Seleka rebel takeover 10 months ago. Well, Duncan Woodside is in Addis Ababa for us. He joins us now. Duncan, so it looks like the agenda has really been eclipsed by these crises.
Well, that's right, yes, of course, as ever, security and the various conflicts dominating the agenda here at the African Union. This time around, it's the new conflict in South Sudan and also the descent into chaos in the Central African Republic. Now, with regard to the Central African Republic, there was a meeting of the Peace and Security Council here yesterday, which was addressed by Idris Deby, the president of Chad. He underlined the need to upscale assistance for the existing African-led intervention in Central African Republic. That's been followed today by additional comments by Alpha Condé. He's the president of Guinea, again urging support by the international community for the African-led intervention ahead of any upscaling into a UN force.
We need to make a major financial and logistical effort. We have enough men, but we do not have the equipment. In Central Africa, there are not many roads. It's hard to move around. We really need a major financial and logistical effort to cope. We already have 6,000 men, and the Europeans will send 500 men. It's enough. We need to sort out logistical and financial means before the troops arrive.
So, Duncan, when it comes to the bloc itself, Mauritania is taking over at the head of the African Union after what's been actually a very turbulent year under Ethiopia's presidency.
That's right. Yes, Mauritania has now taken over the rotating presidency or chairmanship of the African Union. That comes in a context where there have been lots of ins and outs in terms of suspensions of membership. Obviously, Egypt at the moment is suspended. There's nobody representing Egypt at the heads of state meeting, which got underway today. That's due to the fact that the military seized power from the democratically elected Muslim Brotherhood in July. And also Central African Republic, the new president of that country, or the interim president, has not been invited to attend. That's because of the Seleka takeover, which took place 10 months ago. But on the upside, Madagascar is now back in the club, following successful elections which were deemed to be credible by the African Union late last year.
Thanks very much. Duncan Woodside there for us in Addis Ababa on the opening day of the African Union Summit. Well, South Sudan remains a country on edge. Despite a ceasefire agreement signed last week, clashes between rebel and government forces continue. Thousands have been killed and 800,000 driven from their homes. Over 60,000 refugees have headed into Uganda as the conflict took them and regional aid agencies by surprise. Sarah Sacco and Josh Vardy have the story.
A village now filled with refugees. War in South Sudan has brought more than 45,000 people here to Zaipi in northern Uganda. They face a shortage of most essentials: food and water, shelter and medicine. According to aid agencies, almost 90% of these refugees are women and children. This mother was forced to give birth in a tent after fleeing her hometown Bor in central South Sudan.
We fled when the war started. My husband left us here with my mother and the children. Then he returned to fight against the rebels.
Like most of the refugees here, this woman is from the Dinka ethnicity, the same as South Sudanese President Salva Kiir, who's fighting a rebellion led by Riek Machar, a politician from the Nuer community. The Ugandan government does not allow refugees to be divided by ethnic groups, but here at the camp, that already seems to have happened.
Here is majority Dinka, over 90%, 91%, but actually further down in our Kirindongo settlement, it's the reverse with around 90% Nua. I think it's also the way people travel, people travelling together, people are travelling to meet with the people they feel more comfortable.
There may be tribal tensions behind the conflict, but these refugees say they don't understand it. This is the third time Michael has fled his country since 1997. Before, it was due to the war between North and South Sudan.
Yeah, actually, I feel bad now because I get independence, but now it is very difficult for us now to begin refugees. Since I was in refugees, I was getting difficulties.
Since mid-December, the conflict in South Sudan has pushed almost 60,000 people into North Uganda. Around 50 refugees are still pouring in every day.
South Sudan's troubles are also of concern to the Anglican Church. Its head, Archbishop Justin Welby, met with President Salva Kiir in Juba on Thursday. This at the start of a 5-day tour of Africa. He's called for reconciliation and condemned the killings of Christian aid workers. Well, in another look towards the continent by the Anglican Church, Archbishop Welby and other top members of the Anglican Church have addressed a letter to Nigerian and Ugandan presidents calling for the acceptance of homosexuality. Both nations have passed legislation that targets gay people. On Thursday, the city of Gardaya in Algeria was reported calm, but in recent weeks there have been ethnic clashes in the southern desert town. 3 people have been killed. Our reporter brings us more from the city about the tensions between Berber and Arab communities that some fear may escalate into sectarian conflict.
The destruction of this mausoleum at the end of December is at the root of the violence in Gardaya. It was the tomb of a scholar who in the 17th century helped to integrate Arabs in this Berber town. Gardaya now has 400,000 residents and is situated 600 kilometers south of Algiers. These last few days, the Mozabites from the Berber community have not gone to work.
The security situation forced us to close our shops. No one from here can solve the problem. It has to be dealt with by the highest authorities.
The Arabs make up a quarter of the population. In their district, you can still see evidence of the clashes. Abdelkader says some Mozabites destroyed his house.
There were lots of them. They were organized, they threw stones and Molotov cocktails. We defended ourselves, but we're tired. We called the authorities. They only came on the 3rd day. Everything was already burnt.
The Mozabites accuse some of the police of siding with the rioters. This month, 3 people were killed. The government has just sent 3,000 extra police to Gardaya. But here, Berbers and Arabs have lived together for centuries, and most residents hope peace will return soon.
2 months ago, Ghana got a stark warning from the European Union. It was told to stop Ghanaian vessels fishing illegally or face a ban on fish exports to the EU. Well, since then, the government has been scrambling to put new policies in place. Our correspondent, Katerina Vitozzi, looks at the progress so far.
In Ghana, fishing is big. The industry employs more than 2 million people. But the European Union says it's a sector riddled with illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing, IUU fishing for short. With a potential export ban looming, the Ghanaian government's cracking down.
Last year, a fisheries enforcement unit was inaugurated and established, which means that sea patrol and arrest and then prosecution have been enhanced. Such an information will have to be sent to the Brussels to know what we are doing. I believe that would fast track, and then I'm sure by the end of the day we will be able to meet all the conditions that the EU has put in place.
The EU fish ban would take a big bite out of Ghana's economy. According to government figures, the industry makes up 4.5% of the country's annual income. That's more than 800 million euros a year. Tuna fishing is the biggest earner. Ghana, by income, is the 3rd biggest exporter of tuna products to the EU. And that's the industry already feeling what a full ban could bring. The UK is holding up $30 million worth of Ghanaian processed tuna imports because it says it can't prove the fish was caught legally.
If there's any policy that seeks to make sure that we do responsible fishing, we are all for. Our concern primarily is about how either the EU and the policymakers in this season government went about implementing this.
Ghanaian trawler owners claimed they weren't consulted before new controls were put in place, but the government is in a race against time. It has until just May to prove to the EU its fishing industry has changed and that every fish it catches has been done so legally.
That wraps up African news for me, but I will be back with more in an hour. Stay with us. So a short break, and we'll be having more news and headlines from around the world. Take care.